In 2019, a young New York City woman was found hanging in her walk-in closet in her Manhattan apartment, and the ME labeled it a suicide. Her remains were handed over to her family, but the funeral director they enlisted sent those remains back to the coroner's office after noticing bruises that were, quote, significant and troubling. So the ME did an autopsy and then promptly doubled down on the original conclusion: suicide. Like Ellen Greenberg, Sonam Kestria was 27 years old, and like Ellen, she has parents who will never believe that she took her own life and who've spent years fighting in the courts to have their death investigated by the police. In a minute, you're going to meet their attorney, who also represents Ellen Greenberg's parents, Josh and Sandy. But first, I want to walk you through some red flags that the family can't get past, and you might not be able to either, because I know I can't. Let's begin with the person who found Sonam's body. He was an ex-boyfriend named Luke Kareem Matthew. He's a competitive jiu-jitsu fighter, and the family's investigation found that he has 7 prior arrests. He and Sonam broke up months before her death, but just 2 days before her alleged suicide, he texted her suggesting that they watch a UFC fight together. That was on Saturday, September 14th, 2019. The ex-boyfriend claims that he left the next morning on Sunday at 7 a.m., but then says he came back on Monday to walk the dog that the two apparently shared. He says that Monday is when he found Sonam's body hanging in the closet. Here's the problem. Sonam was seen on surveillance video on that previous Saturday, 2 days earlier, wearing the exact same clothes that she was found in when she was dead. Again, 2 days later, wearing the same clothes. And there's more. Luke Kareem Matthew, the ex-boyfriend, told the police that the 911 operator instructed him to cut Sonam down because she was hanging. But we got our hands on the recording of that 911 call, and that is definitely not what he was told. Listen for yourself.
What's your apartment number? 30. What floor you live on? Your apartment number is 30? Sir, listen to me. I'm not understanding anything you're saying. You have to talk clearly. Please, she's not breathing. Hurry up.
I don't hear them saying cut her down, but he insisted that they told him to. I should note that Sonam's ex is not charged or suspected of any crime in connection with Sonam's death. Nobody is. But should somebody be? The crime scene, believe it or not, even though it was a hanging, was bloody, dripping with blood, in fact. But no blood was found on Sonam's hands. So how does that work? If she's going to hang herself and there's blood everywhere, how does it somehow get off of her hands? Investigators also noticed rigor mortis had set in, but they never explained why her arm and her legs were bent. Because, you know, if she'd hanged herself hours earlier, everything would be in a straight line. Still no official change, though, in the suicide finding. And that brings me back to Joseph Podraza. He is the attorney for Sonam's parents, but he also represents Ellen Greenberg's family, and he's here with me live. It's good to have you, Mr. Podraza. Thanks so much for being here. First question, where does Sonam's case stand right now as we speak?
Well, Ashley, we are at the highest court in New York State asking for the court to review the matter and to assist in ordering that an investigation be done and a more thorough investigation be done than what's been done in this case. And we're waiting for that court to decide whether they will take the matter up or not.
So the blood was a total shock to me when I found out about it, because I thought in a hanging, you don't usually have a bloody crime scene. Well, I can't even say it's a crime scene right now, but you don't usually have a bloody scene. And yet there's lots of blood in the photos, and there's none of it on Sonam's hands. How did the medical examiner explain that conundrum?
Well, they actually don't. And their only explanation that they put forth is that, well, maybe when the emergency personnel showed up on Monday after the call was made to 911, maybe they were so sloppy that they spread the blood around on the apparatus or the rope that was used for the hanging. The blood that is outside of the scene that cannot be explained from the hanging, they have no explanation for. And that leaves us then in the quandary when you have these problems, you can't call this a suicide. What you need to do is more investigation to figure out what happened here.
Boy, I'll say, you know, it's no secret that medical examiners don't just work like Quincy in the lab. They go onto the scene and they look at the scene. They take in all of the data. They add that to whatever they find in autopsies, and they usually come up with their findings. Was the medical examiner actually ever on the scene? Do we know if he or she spent any time on the scene and actually looked at the closet? Is there a report that suggests as such?
There would be no indication in the records that we've been given or even in our discussions with the medical examiner's office that the actual pathologist visited the scene to satisfy himself about what transpired there, or maybe there's other evidence that he needs to focus on that hadn't been taken into consideration. There was absolutely no desire on their part to do that.
So what's behind the digging in? Because I always think that, you know, if there's a red flag and somebody finds information that's helpful and they return it to the ME would say, you know, thank you for this. I did not see this. I'm going to revise my findings, because all information, is accumulated in the findings. Instead, they said, no, we're sticking by our original plan, and that was suicide. What would be behind that? Ego or something else?
Ashley, at this point, all I can say is it appears that it would be ego, and just simply the office made a decision and they're going to stand by it and see it to the end. We've seen this in Philadelphia in the Greenberg case, where we've had to fight to the nth degree, and we don't quite understand why. And several judges have said the same thing. We don't understand why the city is fighting it so hard. We are seeing the same thing in New York City.
What do you and the family believe happened in that closet?
There is no doubt in my mind that Sonam was murdered. No question in my mind. And there was a physical altercation. She has several bruises on her body. She has 4 unexplained hemorrhages on her scalp, sufficient enough to render her unconscious. The way the scene is, there was no question in our mind that it was staged. And there was certainly a third party there, because there was blood that was transferred from her nose, where she was bleeding, to this terry robe belt that was used. And since Sonam doesn't have any blood on her hands, which is not in dispute, and therefore can't be responsible for that transfer, that somebody did it. And it wasn't done when she was found, because she was no longer bleeding and the blood was dry. And herein lies the problem. You can't explain that away without saying a third party was there, which then means the probability of a homicide exists. And when that exists, you can't call it a suicide. Simple as that.
So, Mr. Podraza, I'm not a doctor, and I have never even wanted to be a coroner, but I know a few things, and that is that if you are hanging and you're not touching the ground, there is no way that your arms or legs can bend and rigor mortis can set in that way. What is the ME's explanation for the rigor mortis of a bent arm, I believe, and bent legs?
There has been no explanation provided to us. We've really thoroughly looked at this matter before we approached the medical examiner's office, bringing in a nationally, if not internationally renowned neuropathologist who also assisted us. These questions were posed to the medical examiner's office, and we were simply then provided with responses, well, it could be this, it could be that, conjecture, speculation. And we explained to the medical examiner's office, you know, there's a family in pain here. Their daughter has passed. There's nothing worse for a parent than to have a child predecease them. And they're in pain, and all they want to do is know the answers, and they want sufficient answers. And we just have never gotten that from the medical examiner's office. And we are going to get it one way or another, whether it's through the legal process or going back to the police department and banging on the doors and asking them to do an investigation nevertheless.
Well, I can't figure out why an ME would bring this heat upon the office, given that families are not going to let go that easily when their children are found in this manner. There is one thing that's on their side of the ledger, maybe, and I want to get your thoughts on it. Her personal journal was inexplicably left in the front entrance table. Maybe that's where she leaves it. Most people have it somewhere where they write, maybe at bedside or at the desk, but it's right there at the front entrance, as if to say, hey, find me, I'm here. But this is what's inside it. And I think it's in her handwriting, but you can disabuse me of that if I'm wrong. It says, when I imagine my life, I see you. I cannot see the future if you're not in it. I love you and I want us to be happy. I want you to be happy with the love of your life. I'm sorry if I hurt you. I'm sorry I hurt you and I lied to you and made you not trust me and believe I don't love you. I'm sorry for everything, but most for causing you grief, sadness, stress, and pain. I love you and I always will. I hope we meet again. Love, Sonam. What is the explanation for that journal entry if you believe that Sonam was murdered?
It's really twofold. And we broached this topic with the family. Sonam had been to a retreat where she was a prolific writer. Graduate of Columbia University, very intelligent young lady. And she liked to express herself through writing. And we believe that this is one of the passages that she had completed. But this is what's important. At the time of her death, the journal from which that passage was written was not on the premises. So what was done is it was torn out of some book, and it was then placed in the premises in a different book. How it got there is, to me, very suspicious, and there's plenty of opportunity for somebody to have put it there, after the fact, upon arrival to the premises. So what the authorities like to call a suicide note is, but not by, it's not as certain as they like to relay it to be, and is an explainable event. This is a young lady who did not have any deep psychosis, was not involved with heavy drugs or any type of extreme lifestyle. She was a professional doing extremely well in the city, and was just a lovely person that everybody acknowledges. And suicide is something that no one would have attributed to her. Although I know that the ex-boyfriend was saying that to the authorities, and to a certain extent, I think that did lead to the authorities maybe going off trail and not paying enough attention to the actual physical evidence.
Joseph Podraza, we're not going to leave this one, and I hope you'll stay with us and give us updates. The minute you find out something new, give us a call, come back on the show. Thank you for this.
We will do so, and thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to yourself as well as your viewers.
Yeah, you bet. And I'll just give this quick shout out as well. If people want to find out more about Ellen Greenberg, Death in Apartment 603, what happened to Ellen Greenberg, is now streaming on Hulu and on Disney+.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.